Die Gedanken sind frei,
my thoughts freely flower.
die Gedanken sind frei, my thoughts give me power.
No scholar can map them.
No
The purpose of
hunter
Freethought
can
Forum is to be
trap
vigilant to the
them.
encroachment of
No
religion
person
into
can
government
deny.
and to
Die
educate the general
Gedanken
public
sind
as to what a
frei.
freethinker
No
is.
person can deny. Die Gedanken sind frei.
I think as
Welcome to Freethought Forum. I'm your host, Ed Liggett. Today we're going to talk about things that are happening in Bosnia, and we're going to be very specific this time. We're going to talk about the rape of Bosnian women. And I'm very happy to have as my guest and to welcome back again Ms. Nazli Siddiqui, journalist Nazli Siddiqui. Okay, Nazli, welcome back to Freethought Forum. And I think the last time you were here, you were talking about some of the war things that were happening in Bosnia, and how it related to the Serbs and the general warfare things that were going on over there. And of course, if we have a little time, we're going to talk about a little bit more about that and catch up with that later on. But this week, we're going to talk specifically about the rape of Bosnian women. And not only the rape of Bosnian women, but because other things come into play too, like battering and a lot of these other things that happen to women. But in this instance, we're talking about a war that's going on. These things have happened, and the atrocities that have been committed under the disguise of warfare. So I wonder if you would start us off by talking about the type of warfare that's going on over in Bosnia now as it relates to women.
We're talking about rape here, and rape by any standards is a very despicable crime. But in case of Bosnia, the Bosnian-Balkan conflict, rape has been used as a war tool, which is unheard of in the history of times. And this way it makes it very, very despicable and very dark, a dark deed, I would say. It's going to be a blight on the face of Serbian nation for all times to come, if history records correctly. War crimes have been committed by Bosnian Serbs in a way that I would say it is the most grotesque spectacle and of the modern times. It is a genocide, and it is an irreparable tragedy. I would say it's a subhuman behavior on a social level, because this is not the outcome of a criminal disposition of an individual, but this is perpetrated and done in an organized manner. It has been like a war crime and like a policy given by the high commands, which the soldiers have committed. And the purpose is to humiliate the victim, humiliate the families, and humiliate the communities. And in a way, we can compare this to the Holocaust. How can we not compare? This is so dark.
Yeah, one of the things about the Holocaust, and I think people get fixated on numbers, but the thing about the Holocaust is that the government set up a system, a bureaucratic system, where everybody is involved in for one specific thing. In the case of Jews, it was to eliminate the whole Jewish race. In the case of Bosnian women, we're thinking about impregnating them, raping them, and it has no precedence in warfare. Of course, women have been raped in warfare before, but in this case, it's a specific thing done and from people above. And how do you think this really impacts on Muslim women?
It is the worst possible tragedy that could happen to a Muslim woman, even in an isolated individual case. But this is, like I said, it is a war policy. It is a genocide. It's humiliation on a mass scale. And this has been proved by commissions of UN commissions on war crimes in Yugoslavia, by several ones, who have indicted the war commanders of Bosnian Serbs into these doing these activities. And what they've done is that they have created mass camps in which they've taken those women and used them as concentration camps, raped them. And these are not strangers. These are your neighbors that have done to you. They come in night after night, knowing these women, calling their names, and raping them, humiliating them, beating them, in certain cases, mutilating them. And that is to show their anger against not being an ethnically cleansed society. That's what they want. They're ultra-nationalists. And that is the aim, to obtain ultimately a clean ethnic society for themselves. And this is a grave crime committed against humanity, against humankind.
Now, there are specific things about Muslim women, too, because in the society that they are in, women have to be chaste before marriage and so forth. So what do you think? Is this the end of their life, or so to speak, this trauma, because it goes beyond the trauma itself? It goes to the very being of their future.
That is true. That is very true. In those societies, extramarital sex is unthinkable. Even consensual sex is forbidden, and it rarely happens. So a rape is a very, it's the limit, it's the last limit, and it's like the end of life almost. But in this case, one thing is that it is socially unacceptable, but I'm sure things are different because it's a war, and people are looking at it more sympathetically, and there are more sympathies for those women out there. But still, it is almost like the end of life for them. And the purpose of these crimes is to humiliate those women and to humiliate the entire Muslim community in Bosnia, to the extent that they would be totally psyched out and would not be able to stand up against them in the near future, at least. This is a way to defeat them, and a very despicable way, I would say.
And there is one other thing we should perhaps speak about it also, that something that hasn't happened before is that they are raping the women and forcing them to impregnate them, and then forcing them to carry the child to term. And this is something I don't think that anyone has ever done before.
No, nobody has ever done that. This is the first time history is going to record this genocide. And it beats me to the purpose, but I think it is the psychological makeup. You've got to understand the psychological makeup of the Serbs. They have been reduced to a pack of wolves, I would say. And they are doing this to, I would say, impregnate those women and impregnate the Bosnian population with Serb babies, so that they would not be pure Muslims. This is just sickness of the mind.
So, what do you think? I mean, you have to speculate. What do you think is going to happen? One, to the babies, and because the Serb men aren't marrying, or aren't going to take the Muslim women, and the Muslim women aren't going to take the Serbs. So, what do you see as a future for these babies? Is this, they're simply going to take the babies and away from the mother and bring them up in the Serb?
That's an excellent issue that you've touched upon, and I've started pondering on it. And the thing is that nobody has addressed the issue up to this point, and I think this issue has to be addressed totally separately. What is going to happen to those babies? Nobody has said anything about it. No news agencies, not the United Nations, nobody has said anything about it. So what is the future of the babies? We have to find out, and we have to start thinking about it, because no, the Serbs are not going to take those babies, because they're not the responsible fathers anyway. And if they take those babies, probably they'll just kill them. And what the Muslim mothers are going to do with those babies, I'm not sure. Probably just keep them, but what kind of a generation is going to grow up? It's a big question mark.
Of course, the United Nations War Tribunal has said some things about this. Do you happen to have any kind of comments on what they've done so far?
The Serbs?
No, the War Tribunal.
The War Tribunal have indicted the forces, the Serbian forces, and they have indicted certain of their commanders, like Karadzic, the leader of the Serbs in the Bosnian Serbs, and the commander Mladic, who's the commander of the armed forces of the rebel Serbs, and certain other individuals. They have been indicted, but the hearings have not started. The hearings are going to start sometime before winter in The Hague. But people are seriously doubting that anything ever is going to happen because the Serbs are refusing to accept the jurisdiction of these tribunals. And they are refusing to hand over the criminals to these tribunals. So I seriously doubt anything is going to happen. And this is one thing that we need to address in the peace talks, that if peace has to happen, if peace is going to happen in Bosnia, those criminals should be handed over to the tribunals. What probably they are going to do is to issue arrest warrants on the international level to arrest anybody, any of those criminals who are traveling abroad. The maximum sentence is a life sentence that they can get.
Well, you don't seem to be optimistic about the tribunal doing anything.
They have no legal binding on the Serbian forces, and Serbs don't have the responsibility to accept that they have done something wrong.
Well, we have touched on the Muslim women and the rape of the Muslim women. What is the underlining motive, do you see, for that? Why would they do this? I mean, it would appear that they're, other than making the Muslim men feel bad, there must be something more to it.
If you really hate your enemy and you are carnal enough to hit them the worst way you can, then you need to know what your enemy values the most. What Muslims value the most is their dignity and their chastity. More than their life, they are sometimes willing to give up their lives to safeguard their honor. That's the psychological makeup of Muslims. So what would hit them the most? By humiliating their women. That is the worst kind of injury you can inflict on the Muslims. And that's exactly because Serbs have been their neighbors. They've been living with them for centuries. They know what is going to hurt Muslims the most. So they are going to hurt them the worst way they can.
Hey, you and I were talking earlier about also that Muslim women, and in particular these closed type societies, don't have access to any kind of rape crisis awareness programs that will help these women and so forth and so on. Do you advocate maybe the UN setting something up along this line?
I very strongly advocate, because whatever little support system they may have must have been totally disrupted due to the war, and it is our human responsibility to send out some kind of aids to those women. And some kind of assistance to them, because I'm sure they're in grave need of it.
Okay, now we have had reports of women taking the route of suicide and even mutilation or whatever. I mean, can you comment on that? I mean, is this really happening?
Yes, this has really happened. And I wouldn't be surprised that a Muslim woman would go and commit suicide after she's raped, because she's not only been hurt, but she is so humiliated that she cannot face her own people, she cannot face her own families, her father, her son, her brother, her mother. So what is the easiest way out for her is to commit suicide. And it's very sad. It's extremely pathetic. And you talk about mutilations. You need to understand the Serbian psychology. Really, you got to understand what the underlying motives are when they mutilate. We can comment on certain kinds of mutilations that they've done to the other side, and we've heard about cutting off noses, cutting off ears and tongues, cutting off fingers after killing them. And if you look at it deeply, what it means is that cutting off a nose is a sign of humiliation. Cutting off ears and tongues is making them deaf and dumb. Now, this is so sick to do something to a person who's already been killed or been dead. Cutting off their fingers. Have you ever heard of the sign that the Serbs make for depicting Serbian unity? The sign is 3 fingers of their right hand. So cutting off fingers of their adversary means destroying the unity. It's all their mental sickness that they're exhibiting through these mutilations.
Now, we've talked about something that may happen to the Serbs. In other words, the UN may exact a punishment. And we've also talked about the women and some of them committing suicide, trying to deal with it. The one thing I think we should probably talk about is what does the society itself, the Muslim society, do to help these women themselves? I mean, to provide some kind of support basis rather than to look at them as a throwaway member of society.
I agree with you, and this is only going to happen if there is widespread of education on the subject and there is total change in the outlook. But I'm sure a tragedy like this in itself is going to be a lesson for them, because they would not see this as something that may have come out of some wrong act of a woman. They know that these women have been dragged out of their homes and have been forced into these humiliating conditions. So things are going to change, but things are going to change very slowly, and somebody's going to address it from that point of view.
Okay, well, let me put you on the spot a second here. What do you like to see as a support basis for these women?
Support basis?
Yeah, would you like to see
say
more medical, in other words, doctors that are psychiatrists, people that come in and talk to them about what has happened to them, and talk to the family,
Okay.
the physical elements. There are other many things that are going to be needed. I would perceive for myself, but I'm not a woman, and I'm not from that society, and I'm trying to get some feel for.
What I hear from the rape victims is that they feel very unclean after a thing like this is done to them. They feel the need to be purged, and this is the exact help that should be given to them besides the medical assistance. I think they need psychiatric help, and they need to be told that they're not done for, they're not dirty, it's not their fault, and there is life in front of them. There's everything for them once they get over this trauma. And the society needs to be told too, educated too, to treat these women with compassion and with more care, and not to look upon them as somebody who's low caste or down.
Okay, we recently had the women's conference in Beijing, and I was very happy to see that they also made this issue.
They raised this issue.
Yeah, they did raise this issue. Could you tell us a little bit about that?
They raised this issue, and they overwhelmingly condemned the practices of raping women in wars and in crisis. And they called upon the world conscience to take this issue, take it up, to see that this doesn't happen in future. And this is just a little, I would say, piece of education for people to understand that they need to change these practices over the period of time, to educate the masses, to educate the people, to stay away from these activities, to educate men, not to humiliate women in such a fashion. But if you're going to ask me what this document is going to do in near future, I'm not very hopeful again, because this document is also not legally binding on any of the government. So probably what it's just going to do is bring about some education in people, some enlightenment.
Well, I hope you're wrong about that. I was very proud myself.
I'm proud too, because they did what they could do.
Yes.
But it's up to the governments to take it up from there.
Do you think in terms of each government taking it up, or the world body as a government taking up the issue of...
The world body, again, cannot put legal pressures on each government, so it's up to each government to take it up to the grassroots level.
Okay.
To make a difference.
Well, let me ask you one other question while I'm on this subject. Are the Muslim as a group, and we do have almost 1 billion Muslims, or have they band together to show some kind of support for the women in that particular area?
Yes, they have shown a lot of sympathy, because this is also like a blow to the entire Muslim people throughout the world, and they have been very vocal about it and very sympathetic about it. They understand that it's a war against them.
Okay. You said that as sisters, in other words, I guess you're saying as women, that they should be sending some kind of assistance to the Bosnian women. What do you envision as assistance to these women?
I think the best thing to do is for the women's groups, basically to take this up as a responsibility, because a woman being hurt in United States is the same as a woman being hurt in any remote part of the world if we start thinking in terms of womanhood. So it's not too much to ask from them to send some assistance to that area, to send some education, some personnel, some kind of help to organize, maybe not to stay there and to help, but to go out there to organize some support system over there before coming out for the support system to help those women.
And again, you are advocating doctors, medical assistants,
rape counselors,
and this type of. I was wondering whether or not there are any trained rape counselors in the Muslim community that can go there and help these women, or at least go to some of the areas where they are considered safe and talk to these women.
You mean women from the United States, or
well,
from any
even
part of
from
the world?
Muslim community here, or the Muslim community in Saudi Arabia or Egypt. Egypt has an extensive medical services that I'm aware of.
I'm sure that can happen, but at this moment I am addressing, when I say sisterhood, I'm talking about the womankind, and that should not be restricted to the Muslim women. Muslim women should stand up to help if they can, they should. But that doesn't mean that women from other faiths and religions should not go or should stop themselves from getting up to help, because this is a woman's issue, basically.
Well, that's what I was trying to elicit from you because, well, I'm sure if you have to think about the religious requirements are entirely different, and I'm sure that rape is a traumatic experience for any woman, and particularly even in our society. But
oh, yes, society.
we are not thinking in terms of the woman being at the end of her life. In America, if that happens, and we're continually trying to learn what we can do to help these women. So this is the reason I say, well, you know, I'm trying to be pacific, and I'm saying that most women will not understand the Muslim thinking, religious thinking, because it does play a part.
And I really feel that women. If women from this society go out there, they would be in a better position to help because they would not be feeling so pathetic as a Muslim woman would be feeling out there. She might get overwhelmed, but any professional rape counselor, I'm sure, can go and adjust to the requirements of the society and help. I have no doubts about that.
Okay. Well, any other comment you would like to make on the subject matter of Bosnian women? And
there's one other thing that I would like to bring up, and it's not been much publicized, is that the Serbian doctors have committed some crazy experiments. They have made some crazy experiments on the Muslim women, like planting animal embryos in their wombs and trying to create some biological researches for their own future generations, which have caused those women to die and get sick in very pathetic, pitiable conditions.
So this is pretty much reminiscent of some of the things that the Nazis had done during.
That's why we say it is a replay of the Holocaust, and people have got to understand that. And these are one or two things that have been reported. How about the other things that may not have been reported? What do you know what has been done there? Because we've heard of, I was reading the Time magazine, the latest issue, and it carries a story about the peace process that's going on in Bosnia right now. And in the midst of the peace process, what's happening is that the Bosnian Serbs are throwing the refugees out of their homes. They're looting, they're mutilating, they're vandalizing, and while the families are exiting, they're asking the parents to buy the lives of the sons and buy the chastity of the daughters against rape if they have to take them along with the families. And this is being done by the neighbors, by the man next door, by the person with whose children your children may have played. So those things are unheard of. And what is going on in Bosnia, only the Bosnian people know.
Well, we'll have to leave it at that. Journalist Nazli Siddiqui, thank you for coming again. And let's do this again because this is a continuing thing. The President just announced that when the peace process starts, he's going to send 50,000 troops. And I would like to know your thinking on that too. And so again, we're out of time, I'm afraid. Thank you for joining us here at the Freethought Forum, and please join us again next week.
I think as I please, and this gives me pleasure.
My conscience decrees, this right I must treasure.
My thoughts will not cater
to duke or dictator, no person can